Thank you for joining me on 13 Plus. I'm Cali Lichter, and this is On the Docket, a weekly recap of crime and court in and around the state of Michigan. This week, we're taking it back to the cases that gripped West Michigan in 2025, from killer parents to crimes at Walmart. All that and more is On the Docket. In 2025, 13 on Your Side investigated several stories involving religious leaders in West Michigan and alleged crimes against them. We start with the end. In mid-December, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel's office released a report on 51 Catholic clergy members in the Diocese of Grand Rapids, describing decades of sexual abuse allegations against them. It's all part of an investigation by the Attorney General's office that started in 2018. We first broke the news a few days before the report, but before we get into that, let's listen to what was in the full report. Contained in an over 300-page report detailing alleged sexual abuse and misconduct in the Catholic Diocese of Grand Rapids are the identities of 51 Catholic clergy members and allegations from around 150 men and women who say the clergy members abused them.
Regardless of how long ago their assault may have been, is important in acknowledging their pain and fostering a culture that prioritizes these victims over their silence.
Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel announced Monday morning the release of the report by her office after years of investigation. Allegations span decades, with reports ranging from 1950 through the 2020s, but none of the clergy members are charged from this investigation. In the majority of cases, clergy members are alleged to have abused minors, like former priest Dennis Wagner, number 48 in the report, who accusers reported abuse spanning decades. Despite a misdemeanor conviction related to gross indecency involving a minor, he wasn't removed from the priesthood until 2004. One of his victims, when offered support as an adult, is quoted saying, "I don't know which is worse, that you have a person that works with people abused by diocesan personnel, or that this happens so often that you actually have a name for it." But not all the allegations involve children. Last week, 13 on Your Side spoke to a victim of Father Peter Amogo, a former priest in West Michigan who is now in Nigeria. The woman says she spoke with leaders of the Diocese of Grand Rapids about the assault, but for years she wasn't taken seriously.
The diocese knew about this, and they didn't protect me. Thus, all these other horrific things have happened. Right. I'm more angry with the diocese,
which has caused her to lose her faith.
They wronged me, and now I'm not a Catholic anymore. I can't trust it.
37 of the clergy members are dead, and the other 14 aren't in active ministry in the Grand Rapids Diocese. Although the statute of limitations is up for the majority of these cases, the AG's office says they are willing to listen and act on any other allegations of abuse.
We start by believing, and we want to listen, and we want to hear, and we want to be able to take that information, and if we can move forward with a criminal case, then that is something that we've shown that we're willing to do.
The AG's office says the Diocese of Grand Rapids has cooperated in this investigation since it was opened.
Anyone suspected of abusing a minor, child, or vulnerable adult is removed from public ministry until a civil and canonical investigation is complete.
The Michigan Attorney General's 336-page report lists 51 clergy members linked to abuse allegations since 1950 to the present. Most are deceased, and none of the living serve in the diocese. Bishop David Wachowiak says the report details around 150 alleged victims, including abuse of minors and consensual adult relationships, and confirms the church fully cooperated with the investigation.
While it is difficult for our church to face the harsh reality contained in this report, it provides a necessary opportunity for us to pledge to do better and move forward in the light of Christ.
The diocese emphasizes that safeguards have been in place for more than 20 years, including a zero-tolerance policy, mandatory training, and a victim assistance coordinator available 24/7. Annual child safety audits are also conducted to ensure compliance.
We keep the victim survivors at the heart of our response and at the center of all of our actions. You deserve to be heard, and you deserve healing.
Bishop Wackowiak also addressed why the diocese does not maintain a public list of accused priests, citing legal principles including due process and the difficulty of verifying allegations involving deceased clergy.
Every report is important because it reflects the experience of someone who has allegedly been abused. I cannot undo the sins of the past. I can commit as bishop to continue to be open and honest on this matter.
The bishop says the diocese remains committed to protecting minors, supporting victims, and ensuring that clergy misconduct is not repeated.
The diocese takes our promise to protect seriously. To ensure that we retain top safe environment practices, we will continue to work to ensure that victim survivors are heard and that they have what is needed for them to find healing and peace.
The report, the fifth of 7 examining Michigan dioceses, is part of an ongoing statewide effort to examine how the Catholic Church has handled allegations of abuse.
We took a closer look at 2 of the clergy members in the report, Father Peter Amogo and Father Dennis Wagner. A woman came forward to 13 on Your Side prior to the report being published about her accusations of abuse against Amogo. Several women are accusing that West Michigan Catholic priest of inappropriate behavior, but the Michigan Attorney General says her office can't file charges against him. The victim we spoke to was emotional as she detailed how the priest harassment alienated her from her community and the church she loved. Robbed of her Catholic faith.
I believe in God, I love Jesus, but he's robbed me of the Catholic faith because of what he's done. The diocese would not listen to me.
That's how one victim feels after she says Father Peter Amogo, former priest of St. James Catholic Church in Montague, repeatedly touched her inappropriately in a sexual manner. An 18-page report by the Michigan Department of the Attorney General details years of alleged improper conduct and sexual harassment by Amogo dating back to the early 2010s. One of those women, whose identity we're protecting by not using her name and obscuring her voice, shared her story with 13 on Your Side.
I was relieved that he's gone. But now I'm disgusted.
The woman says she was close with Amogo, having him in her family's home for meals, taking him to doctor's appointments, and helping him send out Christmas cards. On one instance, she says he became angry and slammed his fist down, which made her cry.
He lifted me up and he put both hands on my face and he kissed me on the lips and he says, "I'm sorry," kissed me on the lips, "I love you," kissed me on the lips, "I would never do anything to hurt you."
In other instances, she claims he would grab her hand when she and her husband would give him rides, kiss her, and grope her. 13 on Your Side called and texted a phone number with a 616 area code associated to Amogo's charity asking for a statement about the allegations, but have not heard back. The woman says she spoke with leaders of the Diocese of Grand Rapids, but for years she wasn't taken seriously.
The diocese knew about this and they didn't protect me, thus all these other horrific things have happened. I'm more angry with the diocese.
On May 2nd of this year, after more women came forward with similar claims, the diocese website posted that Amogo was recalled to his diocese in Nigeria, his home country, by his bishop, and that he had resigned from his duties in West Michigan. In an emailed statement to 13 on Your Side, the Diocese of Grand Rapids says they were made aware of unwanted contact between Amogo and an adult in 2017, but he was ultimately allowed to remain in active ministry. When the diocese was made aware of new allegations in December 2024, they say he was suspended from ministry for the duration of the investigation. They say he is currently a priest in Nigeria, he has no ecclesiastical connection with the diocese in Grand Rapids, and he cannot be a priest with this diocese.
They wronged me and now I'm not even Catholic anymore. I can't trust it.
Now in counseling, she is reframing the interactions between her and the man she once considered a brother.
I feel that I was used, I was blind. I want to say naive, but my counselor said, no, you were not naive, you were just groomed, and this is the kind of person I am. I take everybody in, you know? Anyone needs help, I help them.
Other women have allegations against Amogo in the report, ranging from repeated sexual assault to being groped in the confessional. Testimony from 3 witnesses who observed alleged harassment is also included in the report, which is due to be released next week. At this time, the Attorney General's investigation into Amogo is closed. They said in part, in some cases, the alleged victims did not wish to move forward. In other cases, the applicable statute of limitations had run. And with regards to certain allegations, it was believed that the department would be unable to meet its burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Father Amogo was guilty of any crime. Father Dennis Wagner had the most complaints in the report at 19. I looked into the nearly 50 pages on Wagner, including allegations from one victim 13 on Your Side spoke to decades ago. Years of accusations, 19 listed victims, and a criminal charge. Father Dennis Allen Wagner has one of the most extensive cases listed in the Michigan Attorney General's report into sexual abuse in the Catholic Diocese of Grand Rapids. The report says Wagner, who was ordained in 1976, allegedly abused multiple young boys starting in the late 1970s, with victims being abused in pools, at cottages and lake houses, and in the showers after games of racquetball. In 1983, Wagner was arrested and charged with gross indecency involving a minor. The report says while Wagner took a boy to his cabin in Newaygo County, he fondled the boy in the car. He pleaded down to a misdemeanor and received 2 years probation, supervised by an auxiliary bishop of the church. He continued with the diocese in restricted ministry positions. Many of the victims, when they came forward with allegations, were offered support by a victim assistance minister. One of his victims who came forward with abuse allegations against Wagner and Father Jean Alvesteffer in 2000 is quoted saying, "I don't know which is worse, that you have a person that works with people abused by diocesan personnel, or that this happens so often that you actually have a name for it." Another victim in the report spoke to 13 on Your Side in May of 2002. Mark Bullerman wanted to achieve his ultimate dream.
I wanted to be a priest and put out the word of God.
But that dream turned into a nightmare when he was introduced to Wagner and he became his mentor.
Well, I mean, he would grab me around my waist and put his hands right in my crotch area and, go kind of like up and down motion.
In the interview and the report, it says the abuse happened at least a dozen times. Bullerman says he did not tell anyone until news came out of his 1983 arrest.
Up to me and said, "Did this happen to you?" I said, yeah. She goes, "Why didn't you say anything?" I said, "Oh yeah, Mom, it's easy to come talk to somebody about this. I thought something was wrong with me."
Bullerman says after he met with high-ranking church officials, which is documented in the report, his issues with Wagner were dropped and buried. The abuse endured by Bullerman changed the trajectory of his life.
"I don't think it was right. You ruined my dreams of what I wanted to become."
While at the time of the story airing, the diocese denied meeting with the Bullermans in 1983, and the report says Wagner denied it, and an official was, quote, inclined to believe him since he had accepted responsibility for other allegations. Wagner remained with the diocese for 19 years in restricted ministry positions after his 1983 arrest. He was then removed from all duties the same day 13 on Your Side story with Bullerman aired, and was removed from the priesthood in 2004. A team here at 13 on Your Side has read through the whole entire report and has in-depth summaries on all 51 clergy members' allegations that can be found completed on our website, 13onyourside.com. A former Muskegon County church leader was sentenced to a decade in prison in February after pleading guilty to child pornography charges. Daniel DeVries has pleaded guilty to possession of sexually abusive material of children after being arrested in March of 2024. DeVries was a deacon at Unity Reformed Church in Norton Shores and volunteered for Kids Hope Network. He was brought to justice by Muskegon County's Justice for Women Task Force and the FBI. During DeVries' sentencing at the Muskegon County Courthouse, the judge and the prosecutor stressed one thing in particular. Even though there were no victims in the courtroom, it did not mean that DeVries committed a victimless crime. Daniel DeVries, a former Norton Shores church leader, will spend up to 10 years in prison for child pornography, a Muskegon County judge ruled Wednesday. He was a deacon at Unity Reformed Church in Norton Shores and a volunteer at Kids Hope Network. DeVries was arrested last March. Before sentencing, DeVries' attorney Jeff West argued these charges and his use of nightmare websites are in the context of DeVries' quote, unhealthy interest in pornography.
It's a Pandora's box. If you have an unhealthy relationship with pornography, the best way to ensure that you're going to have a lot of problems is if you use BitTorrent to access it.
But the prosecution had another term for it.
This was almost an addiction, almost an obsession. He was going on his own computer late at night after his family, his own children were asleep in his home. He was accessing it while he was at work.
Judge Annette Smedley recognized several letters of support for DeVries and the large community there for him in the courtroom.
My 9-year-old son is upset, and that he's out of the community at this time.
But she then proceeded to describe some of the child pornography investigators found downloaded on his computer.
Well, now the community should know. And are they there to support you? They support that you can come into my home with my 9-year-old when you're watching 9-year-olds sexually being abused. I'm thinking I'd step back a little bit before I welcomed you to dinner.
Even though there was not a victim present in the courtroom, Judge Smedley estimated from his watch history there were upwards of 20 victims, not including the community he misled. DeVries has to serve a minimum of 4 years in prison and gets credit for 5 days served. A man charged with multiple sex crimes against children in Maryland in August has ties to a Comstock Park church. 13 on Your Side was contacted about Thomas Pinkerton in March. Tori Grunwell started going to the New Chapel Church in Comstock Park in 2020. She was childhood friends with and a housekeeper for the church's pastor.
Always been able to reach out to them, with concerns and that kind of stuff until recently. And then when I started making my concerns known, they stopped responding to me.
Grunwell came to 13 on Your Side in March of this year expressing concerns about a member of the church, a different pastor, Tommy Pinkerton.
I was one of the youth group leaders and the treasurer of our church on the board since the beginning of the start of this church 10 years ago. He's been very active in our church as a youth pastor and being a traveling evangelist.
According to screenshots taken from the church's website in March, Pinkerton was listed as the church's treasurer. He is not anymore, and his recorded messages have been scrubbed from their website. Pinkerton was one of her son's youth leaders, and she was already uncomfortable by his actions at the church.
Went out of his way during services to point out my son and talk about how anointed he was, and the face of God is upon him, and all of these really faith-based things coming out of his mouth to my son.
She said she contacted multiple people in the church about the allegations.
In that conversation, they told me it was true, and that they just kept asking how I knew. They wanted to know the people who told me and how this information got out.
But as she kept pressing for answers, she says she was kicked out of the church and blocked by people she considered her church family.
I'm just praying that all the truth comes out and that anybody who has been betrayed in this receives the answers that they deserve for our kids.
Grunwell has pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge for threatening the lead pastor at New Chapel, which she said was because she wasn't getting answers. For months, 13 on Your Side has looked into Pinkerton, trying to find arrest records. Until this week, when Pinkerton was arrested in Georgia and extradited to Maryland. Pinkerton is charged in Baltimore County with multiple counts of child abuse, assault, sexual abuse of a minor, and sexual offense. The investigation into Pinkerton started in October of last year, when multiple men came forward expressing they were abused by Pinkerton while a part of his youth group in Maryland between 2006 and 2010. The men claim Pinkerton had a group of minor boys known as favorites, with the victims claiming Pinkerton would sexually assault them primarily at his home in Maryland, often, as the court documents claim, justifying it with religion. In a statement to 13 on Your Side, New Chapel Church said, "We were heartbroken to hear of these serious allegations that occurred in Baltimore, Maryland nearly 20 years ago, and communicated the situation to our church family after severing all ties with the accused several months back. Our prayers and continued cooperation are toward justice for the victims." Detectives do believe there may be more victims of Pinkerton's abuse who have yet to come forward. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Baltimore County Crimes Against Children Unit. At this time, Pinkerton is not charged with any crimes in Michigan. We have not talked with Pinkerton, but his attorney told 13 on Your Side back in August that Pinkerton denies the allegations and that he anxiously awaits his day in court, believing a jury will exonerate him of all charges. He is slated for a jury trial in February of this year. And next on the docket, we take a look into several cases of parents allegedly killing their children. Alleged arson, abuse, and appeals is next.
I don't know if you believe in the power.
Over the past year, there were unfortunately several cases here in West Michigan involving parents killing their children. One of the first cases to start the year was allegedly just that. A Grand Rapids mother was charged with setting her house on fire, killing one of her daughters and injuring others.
It was difficult to watch, even though I've seen this video before. I don't know if you believe in the power of prayer. I do. I'm praying for this little girl at Helen Voss Children's Hospital.
The Saturday morning fire that Raconda Singleton is accused of intentionally setting has left one of her daughters fighting for her life in the hospital, according to Grand Rapids Police Chief Eric Winstrom. Winstrom says the officers found evidence at the scene that supports the arson charge.
So there's a mom that meticulously took all 7 of her smoke detectors and put them in a bag and removed them from the house before she poured lighter fluid all over the house and lit it on fire in an attempt to kill her 3 children.
As for a motive, investigators, including prosecutor Chris Becker, believe this may have been a mental health case.
I think when you looking at the reports I have, it's a mental health issue. I mean, I think that's what's going to come out, and we'll see it play out.
Singleton, according to Becker, has no previous contact with Child Protective Services. However, while she was not on the radar, Winstrom says she has had contact with police officers before.
I do know that one of the officers that was there had knew her by name and face, and that was vice versa. So I knew they had reacted with each other before, but I don't really think that there's that much of a history for that location.
Saying there might be still one kid inside on the second floor.
A Grand Rapids mother charged with setting her home on fire with her 3 children inside appeared virtually in front of a judge Tuesday. Grand Rapids police say Raconda Singleton, who appears in this police-worn body camera footage, used lighter fluid to start a fire in the home Saturday.
Still in the house. My daughter was in there, yeah.
Firefighters found working smoke detectors in a pillowcase near the house. While 2 of the children ran to a neighbor's house, 12-year-old Shemaiah Stewart had to be rescued from the building, dying from her injuries Monday. This body camera footage shows firefighters rescuing her from a second-floor bedroom. Police say Singleton admitted to doing everything while her children were asleep in the home, telling police, "I did it, I am not going to sit here and play like I am the victim," and that she told them her intentions were, quote, to die with her 3 daughters so they could be free. Court documents say she told investigators she was dealing with mental health issues and that she was unable to find help. In a press conference Monday, Grand Rapids Police Department, Kent County Prosecutor, and Grand Rapids Fire all acknowledged Singleton's history of mental health issues.
But there's nothing, no prior child abuse, nothing prior that would indicate she's, went through some issues, and don't know exactly what those are, but it does appear that there's going to be some sort of mental health issue going on here.
The Kent County Prosecutor says her mental health does not affect her charges.
Father, we know, oh God, that even Shemaiah, God, she was your child. And Father, that which belongs to you, God, even though you loaned them to us, Father, we know that she is now safe in your arms.
Wednesday morning, a local pastor prayed over the father of Shemaiah Stewart and her family.
She was a good child, and she was a happy child, and Shemaiah was very, very loved. She had a lot of friends at school. I know her friends are going to be missing her, just like her dad going to be missing her. It's hard. It's hard.
12-year-old Shemaiah Stewart passed away from her injuries Monday night after firefighters pulled her from a burning home Saturday morning. Her mother, 46-year-old Raconda Singleton, has been charged for intentionally starting the fire, with the Kent County Prosecutor's Office announcing a charge for murder Wednesday morning.
She was a special little girl, and she didn't deserve none of this to happen to her.
Shemaiah's family says they have been receiving much support from their community. The Baxter Community Association and the Grand Rapids Fire Department brought clothes and gifts for her 2 sisters who survived the fire.
We also like to thank God for the sister who was brave beyond anything that you can think of, to have enough in her mind to save her and her sister, and wanted to go back and save the other sister, but it was just too much smoke.
The family said they want to see changes made to safeguard children and prevent anything like this from happening again.
It makes you want to reevaluate the system, that they can also do a better job. It could be a learning experience for them as far as chain of command when such things happen, where these kids need to go and where they should be. So I just think with everybody involved, it needs to be some type of accountability.
She know Dad loved her to the end of the days. He always gonna be in my heart. He'll never be forgotten. That's for sure.
Singleton was found competent to stand trial on December 1st. In March, a man was sentenced to decades in prison for shooting and killing his 2-year-old daughter in Wyoming in February 2022. Police said Sunita Parks also shot himself after killing Khalees Brewer, but survived his injuries. A Kent County courtroom was full Thursday for the sentencing of a Wyoming man charged with the murder of his 2-year-old daughter.
It's 1:51 on a Thursday. Khalees should be sitting in her classroom, learning, making new friends, and being an innocent 5-year-old, but instead we are here.
Wyoming police say in early 2022, Sunita Parks shot his daughter, Khalees Brewer, in the eye before turning the gun on himself. Body camera footage shown in court nearly 2 years ago shows officers going into the room where Khalees was killed and taking the gun from him.
Bowing, please.
Unlike in previous court appearances where Parks was criticized for smiling, he was solemn as Khalees's aunt and mother addressed him during their victim impact statements.
You were supposed to be her provider. You were supposed to protect her. You were supposed to love her. Instead, you are her killer.
And I hope that in my dream, her face is just as beautiful as it was when I dropped her off and not scarred from the shot you fired into her eye.
Parks' attorney asked for Judge Clay West to consider Parks' mental health issues, which led him to being found incompetent for a period of time during the case. When he decided the sentence, Parks used his statement to apologize.
I'd just like to say I sincerely apologize to Gabrielle and her family, to my family, to the courts, and that's it for real.
However, Judge West says Parks' history of firearm abuse was horrendous, and the facts of the case painful to read.
The shot was fired approximately 4 feet away. I really couldn't imagine a more difficult fact pattern to work through in the present case.
He sentenced Parks to a maximum of 62 years in prison. In November, a Muskegon County woman was charged with manslaughter in the death of her adopted daughter. But the daughter's birth family, one of the woman's prior adopted children, and community members allege a history of abuse, believing the charges should be more severe. On her 11th birthday, prosecutors say Mila Leake's mother, Sherry Leake, sat on her daughter until she was unconscious. Sherry Leake is now officially facing manslaughter for Mila's November 23rd death.
I've worked with CPS cases. If she was overwhelmed, which you can get, she had help. And she didn't reach out for help.
Members of Mila's biological family were in the gallery showing support for Mila and her twin sister Cali. Both Mila and Cali are the names given to the girls after they were adopted by Leake. They say in the past few years they didn't know for sure why Leake became distant.
We had our suspicions based off what other people in the neighborhood was saying they were witnessing, and based off how she acted during the visitations, it was very suspect.
Mila's grandfather says he feels Leake betrayed them.
I would say something is wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And I do believe that my baby was trying to reach out to us and that she's been silenced.
Manslaughter is different than other charges. There needs to be intent to kill. As of now, the prosecution thinks it's the right charge.
But we're dealing here with an act that, at least at this point, appears to be a grossly negligent act that resulted in the death of this child.
Chief Trial Attorney Matt Roberts says when the final report comes from the medical examiner, Leake could also face child abuse charges, which would be added on to the manslaughter.
If there's an injury inflicted upon a child, that aspect of it, which makes it child abuse, is something that begs for that child abuse charge to be brought.
As for the allegations of previous child abuse in the home, Roberts says if you see something, say something.
I understand that people are saying, well, this might have happened or this might have happened. Like, well, did you report that? And certainly if it was reported, then there are questions to be asked there as well.
Joni Leake says she was close with her adoptive mother, Sherry Leake, when she first started staying at her house. She says in the last few years, however, her adoptive mother became increasingly abusive.
She took Mila, who passed away, in her bedroom and smacked her. And I couldn't do anything about it because I couldn't get to her. Because she had her living room set up where I couldn't get to those kids.
Joni Leake says she lived on and off for several years with the woman accused of sitting on and killing one of her adopted daughters. She says she witnessed and experienced the abuse in Sherry Leake's household firsthand.
It wasn't that bad until COVID-19 started, and that's when she started locking me in my bedroom. She was just doing everything just to set me off.
Joni says Child Protective Services eventually became aware of what she says was happening in the household and paid a visit to both Joni at school and Sherry at the house.
She was acting all nice when I got off the bus because they were there. When they left, Sherry came in my bedroom and said, "So you're telling people lies?"
Anna Mae Lathrop is Joni's biological mother who regained custody of Joni. She says Joni still feels the effects of the abuse to this day. She adds she's deeply worried by what she calls CPS's inaction.
Well, to me, I mean, they've been shut down by people who were supposed to protect them. And if this happened to her, for her to open up, what else happened to them other little girls?
Joni says she was devastated to hear about Mila Leake's death. She believes Sherry Leake is responsible and says she should be punished accordingly.
But I had a bond with her. Like, I did everything with that little girl. Every time she's seen me, like, she hugged me with a big old smile on her face. Like, she had that smile. She had that personality that I fell in love with.
Joni is now fighting for justice on behalf of Mila. She says she's sharing her story to prevent similar tragedies.
I'm trying to be that little girl's voice because she can't no more. She can't open up what she did to her.
Sherry Leak posted a $200,000 bond earlier this week and is expected back in court on December 9th.
Leak posted an increased bond to that amount a few days later, and she will be back in court in February. One of the most notorious child abuse and murder cases in West Michigan also comes from Muskegon County. Nearly 2 years after she was found guilty of abusing and killing her son, Shonda Vander Ark was back in court in November, arguing her attorney was ineffective and she should be granted a new trial.
Nearly a year after she was convicted of torturing and killing her son.
Count 1, charging open murder involving the death of Timothy Ferguson. We find her guilty of first-degree felony murder.
Shonda Vander Ark is arguing the attorney that represented her in that case was ineffective. On Tuesday, again, the hearing was first delayed because her and her attorney argued she was not well enough for the case to begin. But eventually it was ruled she was, and that trial began with the judge.
My question to you is, when these discussions you and Ms. Vander Ark, did she unequivocally say, I am not guilty of any crime?
Her attorney.
Did you guys ever have a discussion? Ms. Vander Ark, you kind of meet these elements of involuntary manslaughter.
And the prosecution.
Did you feel that she was aware about the strategy about attacking the mens rea elements?
All asking her former attorney, Fred Johnson, about the conversations revolving around her innocence or guilt, what possible outcomes could happen in the case, and if she was aware of his strategy. He answering all questions when asked.
What we talked about was she's charged with this homicide, and these are the possible outcomes a jury could legally come to, and these are what they require, and it may be and we talked about it. If we're winning the trial, what do we do?
When that was over, Vander Ark was then asked to take the stand, which she and her attorney once again argued she was not well enough.
I'm miserable. I'm lightheaded. My head is just splitting.
In the end, the judge ruled she did not have to take the stand at that time. And after a social worker and 2 law enforcement officers were questioned as well, court adjourned for the day.
Her son was suffering.
A continuation of the hearing has not been scheduled. And next on the docket, several incidents at Walmarts across Michigan gained attention in 2025. We look into stabbings, rampages, and terrorism next. 2025 was the year of crimes at Walmart in West Michigan and beyond. We started March of this year when a man was charged with causing a rampage at a Holland Walmart, being sentenced 5 months later. After going on what Ottawa County Sheriff's deputies describe as a rampage at a Holland Township Walmart over the weekend, a man is now facing charges for the thousands of dollars in damages. Investigators say the motive is still unknown for why Gavin Love chose the Walmart for the destruction, and he appeared virtually in court Monday, being held down by deputies.
Right now, we don't know any motivation for this. We don't know why the subject selected this store. We don't know why he went into this store, and we don't know why he was in a destructive mood, I guess.
The damages came Friday as investigators say Love entered the Walmart and pulled 6 TVs off the shelves. They say he then took a metal pole from inside the store, causing this damage seen to display cases and shelves. Deputies took Love into custody without issue as he was exiting the store. No one was injured, but Captain Jake Sparks says it could have been much worse.
However, you're talking about the whole store being disrupted, people being disturbed, people being scared, quite frankly, and a large amount of damage and cleanup for the store.
Love was arraigned virtually in a Holland courtroom where the judge says the destruction at Walmart and while in custody posed him a public safety concern.
The court is informed that Mr. Love caused thousands of dollars of destruction in personal property, in addition to additional property that he destroyed since being incarcerated.
She also says if Love gets out on bail, he is banned from all Walmart properties. Court documents obtained by 13 on Your Side say Love was previously convicted in Ottawa County earlier this year for assaulting a police officer and unlawful use of a motor vehicle. Sheriff's deputies carried out Love by his arms and legs at the end of his court hearing.
Hey, there's a guy at the Holland Walmart that just ripped all the TVs off the back wall.
For nearly 10 minutes, dispatchers at the Ottawa County Central Dispatch took 911 calls as a suspect walked around the Holland Walmart off of North Park Drive, destroying merchandise.
He is shattering everything.
Okay, is this the Walmart North Park Drive?
Yes, it is. He's
Okay,
shattering
who are you?
all of our milk glass cases. He's shattering it all.
Investigators believe it was 25-year-old Gavin Love from Grand Haven Township that went on the destructive rampage Friday night. He was arraigned on Monday for malicious destruction of property. He had to be held down by deputies during his arraignment and carried out afterward. 911 calls we gathered through a Freedom of Information Act request gives a look at the path of destruction through the store. The first caller, a customer, reported a man allegedly destroying TVs. You can hear what sounds like something being hit in the background.
And what's he using to shatter things?
Just his hands. No, money.
The second, an asset protection employee with Walmart, reports a man smashing refrigerators in the dairy aisle.
He grabbed one of our metal poles and started shattering all of our glass doors.
Captain Jake Sparks with the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office describes how serious the situation was for everyone in the store.
Well, I would say that anytime someone's that agitated in that state to do that type of destruction, there's always the potential for a physical altercation, and then you add in the fact that he had the metal pole, and it becomes a concern as well. But not only that, then the the glass, flying glass, both on the floor and then flying through the air from the destruction that he was doing could have been dangerous as well. So.
A madman. That's how a judge described Gavin Love as he was sentenced to nearly 3 years in prison for a rampage at a Holland Walmart in March.
Families should not fear that when going grocery shopping, they may be subject to a madman who trashes the store.
Love pleaded guilty to destroying 6 TVs, shattering over 15 glass doors with a metal pole, and causing over $12,000 in damages, which Love says was his way of, quote, letting it out.
Why I did it, the best way I can describe is the feeling of wanting to scream and nobody letting it out. No way to let it out. I'm now on Icarus. I've flown too close to the sun and now I'm paying for my action.
The prosecution asked, because of the crime that was committed, that Love be sentenced to higher than his guidelines. But the defense asked to go within the guidelines because Love wants to move on from this.
He's a young man who made a poor choice, but we asked the court to have the consequence be what the recommendation is, Your Honor.
But Judge John Holsing says the guidelines are advisory, not mandatory. He says Love put the patrons of Walmart at risk.
It can affect the public's perceptions of safety in public places that should be safe from this type of misconduct.
And Love has a history of criminal activity, danger that he presents to the community.
Protect the public from your escalating criminal behavior while sending a message to you and others who would consider such misconduct. That maximum sentence under that cell is going to be imposed.
He sentenced Love to 34 months to 10 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections with over $12,000 restitution. A few weeks before Love was sentenced at the end of July, tragedy at a Traverse City Walmart. Bradford Gilley is charged with multiple counts of terrorism after prosecutors say he went into the Walmart stabbing multiple people. The man in custody for allegedly randomly stabbing 11 people at a Walmart in Traverse City is now facing a terrorism charge. The Grand Traverse Sheriff's Department says Bradford Gilley used a 3.5-inch knife to stab 11 people, ranging in age from 29 to 84, including one Walmart employee. Just before 5 on July 26th, the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office says they received calls about a man with a knife inside the Walmart, quote, actively stabbing people. When deputies arrived, multiple people, including one armed with a gun, were confronting Gilley, shown in bystander cell phone video. Earlier this afternoon, Gilley was in court, arraigned on 1 count of terrorism and 11 counts of assault with intent to murder. At his arraignment, Gilley started off by saying he did not want to speak to the judge.
Yeah, I don't want to talk to you.
But the court hearing continued. When bond was being discussed, the Grand Traverse County prosecutor asked for a significant cash bond to protect the public and because of his prior criminal record.
Clearly, this is one of the most serious crimes that someone can commit in the state of Michigan, and it has a huge impact on public safety. We believe that it's truly the only way to protect the public at this point.
Something the judge agreed with.
So the court is very concerned about the allegations in this complaint. Certainly is one of the most heinous accusations from an individual that's been before this court in 30-some years.
He was given a $100,000 cash security bond and is also not allowed on any Walmart property. While setting bond, the judge had to mute Gilly for talking. And during the hearing, it was put on record Gilly has a history of mental health issues and is currently unhoused.
Here you can see the man who investigators say is 42-year-old Bradford Gilly beginning his violent attack that resulted in 11 people being stabbed. You first see him approach what appears to be a woman in the store. He is then seen going after a man who begins running from the area. It's at that point you can see him stab a number of other shoppers as he continues running. Another angle from the surveillance video shows shoppers who appear aware that something is wrong before running away from the suspect. The surveillance video shows him continuing to attack and stab people in the area. Another angle shows him turning the corner in the frozen food aisle, stabbing another shopper, where the shopper falls to the ground. Another camera near the produce section shows Gilly allegedly continuing his rampage. Authorities appear to have redacted a portion of the video as the man nears the store exit, with people frantically running outside. Now outside, the man approaches and stabs a woman who falls to the ground. She receives help from others as the man runs off screen. Shortly after, the suspect was confronted and apprehended by people in the parking lot, which was caught on bystander cell phone video.
Throw the knife that way! Throw it away!
Saturday's mass stabbing at Traverse City Walmart shocked the community. But for Bradford Gilly's family, it was a tragedy they feared for years.
We have been trying for 28 years to get him into a placement. We're honestly not surprised by any of this.
Gilly, now in custody, is charged with terrorism and assault with intent to murder. He's accused of stabbing 11 people ages 29 to 84 with a 3.5-inch knife on Saturday, July 26th. His brother Shane says Bradford's mental illness began at age 15 after a bad reaction to drugs that left him on a permanent trip.
It never wore off. We ended up going down to the DeBoss Children's Hospital down in Grand Rapids, and we stayed in the Ronald McDonald House for a layover time until he was diagnosed. The actual diagnosis came down to schizophrenia.
Since then, Shane says his brother cycled through short-term care, brief stays, temporary meds, and then release.
We've gotten calls from Pennsylvania that he was running down the highway naked. The community mental health system itself needs to be revamped, reworked, refunded, and looked over again.
In 2016, Bradford tried to dig up a grave. Shane says his brother was convinced his dad was buried alive. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
And still that wasn't enough to get him placement. Or they thought it would be a better idea or more humane to put him on the street.
Mental health experts say the system is strained and underfunded.
It is almost impossible to get people in the state psychiatric hospitals. They're full, and the criteria to get in is more stringent. Our current laws in our society really prevent them from being picked up and placed in a hospital.
Now, as the stabbing victims recover, Shane says his family carries guilt too, but wants people to know they tried.
Most sincere condolences. People, folks, we tried. We tried to take care of him and get him placement, and we were unsuccessful.
Gilly's case is on hold while they wait for competency. A week after the stabbing in Traverse City, a stabbing at a Walmart closer to home. Christian Thompson was charged with stabbing a man at a Comstock Park Walmart while the victim was looking at stereos. A man is facing 10 years in prison after what court documents say was a spur-of-the-moment stabbing at a Comstock Park Walmart Friday. Christian Thompson is charged with assault with intent to commit great bodily harm less than murder, and deputies say bystanders helped get him into custody.
The court is concerned regarding the unprovoked attack of a random person in our community, which raises significant concern for public safety.
According to court documents, deputies responded to the stabbing around 9 p.m. The victim, a Hispanic man, told deputies after he was out of surgery that he, his brother, and a friend were looking at speakers at the Walmart when he felt something on his back, turned around, and got stabbed 2 more times. He told deputies he thought he was being punched at first, but then noticed blood.
It is alleged, not proven, that the victim was stabbed in the back and neck and chest. All 3 of those wounds could have resulted in the death of the victim himself.
Court documents say Thompson was chased through the parking lot, with one bystander hitting him with his car at a low speed in an attempt to stop him, ultimately knocking Thompson down with a shopping cart. During an interview with Thompson, court documents say he initially denied there was a fight, saying he was looking for his truck, which he believed was stolen, and that he was randomly struck by a car and attacked by multiple subjects. After detectives told him, quote, the importance of telling the truth, he admitted to being in a fight with the victim. Then, according to the docs, once he was shown video of the incident, he admitted to detectives he did have a knife and stabbed the men because he, quote, doesn't like bullies and felt like the group had something to do with his truck being missing. Chief Judge Jeffrey O'Hara says the court is very concerned regarding the safety of the community and gave him a $500,000 bond. The man accused of stabbing another man unprovoked in a Comstock Park Walmart previously spent time in California prison, court documents obtained by 13 on Your Side reveal. Christian Thompson is currently charged with assault with intent to commit great bodily harm less than murder after Kent County Sheriff's detectives say he stabbed a man unprovoked multiple times on August 1st at the department store. Nearly a decade ago, Thompson was arrested in California, his home state, on multiple arson-related charges. In a felony complaint obtained by 13 on Your Side out of Riverside County, California, it says on November 22, 2014, Thompson, quote, willfully, unlawfully, and maliciously set fire to a structure in forest land using a device designated to accelerate the fire and delay ignition. On the same day in November, the document says Thompson entered a building with intent to commit theft and a felony. A week later, the doc says he again set fire to a property and caused injury to a person, structure, forest land, and property of another. Also on that date, he says he unlawfully had a flammable, explosive, and combustible material with the intent to maliciously use the material to set fire and burn a structure, forest land, and property. On December 7, 2014, it was alleged he again set a fire that injured a person, structure, forest land, and property of another, and unlawfully had a flammable, explosive, and combustible material with the intent to maliciously use the material to set fire and burn a structure, forest land, and property. He was arrested in February 2015 with a bond set at $5 million. According to court records in California, he did undergo a competency exam as the court had doubts to Thompson's mental competence. He was deemed competent to resume court proceedings. He pleaded guilty to the first count of arson with the enhanced charge and was sentenced to 8 years in California State Prison in December 2016. He was given over 3 years of credit, spending just shy of 5 years in prison. He also had to pay over $19,000 to one of the victims. Thompson's case is on hold while they wait for competency. And next on the docket, the fight for a Michigan family to be released from a Mexican prison was one of our top stories in 2025 after accusations of financial crimes. The Akayo's fight for freedom is next. A West Michigan woman who pleaded guilty to running an illicit massage parlor in Kent County learned her sentence in July. Edith Corbett was the owner of Just Divine, a massage parlor on Plainfield Avenue in Grand Rapids. Corbett pleaded guilty to keeping a house of prostitution there, along with accepting the earnings of a prostitute. The moment she learned she'll be in county jail until July is up right now. There were tears in the courtroom.
I'm sorry.
As a woman learns she will spend a year in jail for operating a prostitution house out of a massage parlor in Grand Rapids.
I thought I was helping the girls at the time by getting them off the streets and giving them a safe place. But I know it wasn't the right way to help them.
Edith Corbett was charged in April of last year after a tip from Silent Observer led the Kent County Sheriff's Office Human Trafficking Task Force to Just Divine Massage Parlor on Plainfield Avenue, where Corbett would charge a door fee and encourage male clients to tip the workers.
I would never have gotten into this industry if I didn't have to.
Corbett told the judge she was desperate after she lost her job at Rite Aid and turned to running the parlor as a way to make money for her kids. She pleaded guilty to keeping a house of prostitution, along with accepting the earnings of a prostitute.
And I'm sorry to the girls, because I should have led them in a different direction like I have in my other careers. I just wish I would have done things differently.
Circuit Court Judge J. Joseph Rossi said Hollywood films like Risky Business and Pretty Woman glamorize sex work, which he says isn't the case.
Who are at a very low point in their life, who, somewhat similar to the situation you described, don't feel like they have any other options, and then they'll tolerate these working conditions.
Along with her jail sentence, she must serve 150 hours of community service at the YWCA or Sacred Beginnings, and her sentence could be reduced if the men who paid for sex acts are identified and prosecuted. In September, a man was brutally assaulted by a group of teenagers after walking home from a bar. But despite public outrage, the teens were not charged as adults.
Nearly 2 weeks after the incident happened,
Todd is like the nicest, most generous person I've ever met.
Nicole Skokina says she still can't get over what happened to her friend Todd Johnson.
He doesn't deserve it.
Skokina says Johnson was walking home from around the Holiday Bar on August 16th when he was jumped by a couple of teens. She says Johnson was beaten so badly he was sent to the ICU.
They beat him basically to death almost. They left his body very bloody and unconscious in the middle of the street.
After the attack, she says the teens went to his home, robbed him, and stole his car.
Why are there 14 to 17-year-olds out at 1:30 to 3 in the morning? Where are the parents?
Grand Rapids police confirmed to 13 on Your Side that on the same day, they were called to a home in the 1900 block of 8th Street Northwest for a burglary and confirmed that an unidentified man in the hospital in critical condition was the homeowner. Right now, one juvenile is charged as a juvenile for aggravated assault, but the family says more charges need to be made.
I think that if you were a juvenile, yes, you beat someone, that's whatever, and that's it. The fact that they went on and then robbed his house and then stole his car, I think that's where it's like, okay, they need to be charged as adults because they're clearly doing more things.
Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker says the teens were charged as juveniles because of the law.
It's a horrible situation, but it's just the fact that a juvenile did a horrible thing doesn't mean it automatically can charge with as an adult. I mean, that's under Michigan law, only gives us certain cases, murder, carjacking, rapes, essentially your capital cases are the cases that we can charge automatically into the adult system.
He also says the investigation is still ongoing and more charges could be made. But even if the teens are still charged as juveniles, they are still serious charges.
We take every juvenile crime seriously. We charge them, higher than we have in the past because of the serious nature of these offenses. We're trying to do everything we can to hold juveniles accountable.
But for Skokina, accountability is the teens being charged as adults.
I truly hope that we can get justice for Todd and hope that these perpetrators can be prosecuted as adults as well.
In March, a West Michigan couple was detained in Mexico over a timeshare dispute. After nearly a month in custody, the couple was freed with help from family and politicians. The Akeo story gripped the nation as the couple fought for freedom.
New video to 13 on Your Side shows the moment Christy Akeo and her husband Paul Akeo were arrested in the Cancun airport 22 days ago. Their mugshots also posted after Mexican authorities accused them of fraud.
This is direct proof of extortion.
Christy's daughter Lindsay Hull has made her mother and stepfather's story public, posting TikTok videos.
We're on TikTok right now and you scrolled by this video. Please stop scrolling and please watch. I'm in desperate need of your help.
And Facebook posts that have gone viral.
You don't get to treat people like this. It doesn't matter who you are. We're going to continue using our voices to stand up for what's right.
ABC News reports the Mexican authorities say the couple was accused of fraud after 13 transactions totaling more than $100,000 from Palace Resorts were canceled maliciously back in 2021. In a statement to ABC News, Palace Company, formerly known as Palace Resorts, says it, quote, filed a criminal complaint with Mexican authorities after Paul and Christy Akeo fraudulently disputed legitimate credit card charges and publicly encouraged others to do the same. Mexican prosecutors reviewed the evidence and, following failed attempts to serve notice, obtained a court-approved arrest warrant. It goes on to say, quote, a judge has since ruled there is sufficient cause for the case to proceed to trial and ordered the preventative detention of the Akeos.
What happened was they got lured into this timeshare, and initially it was some reasonable amount a month.
The Akeos family attorney John Manley told ABC News the Palace Company breached their contract after it took away the couple's benefits, charged them more, and began canceling their reservations.
So essentially they're paying $6,200 a month, for which anybody who's middle class or retired is a lot of money, not allowing them to sell their weeks, what they had promised, and essentially defaulted or breached rather the contract.
Hull says American Express sided with her parents when they disputed the money, but with the couple still in a maximum security prison in Mexico. Hull says the fight to get her mother and stepfather home is far from over.
They have put us through 3 weeks of absolute hell. It's time for us to stand up and use our voice against them.
But this was a really important thing that we had to get done.
An important flight landed in Lansing just after midnight Friday morning. On it, Paul and Christy Akeo.
I never thought we would be coming home for months.
In early March, the Akeos got off their flight in Cancun, Mexico for a vacation. Instead, they were met by Mexican police and spent the last 30 days in prison. Their arrest came after Palace Resorts, a company they purchased a timeshare from years ago, pressed charges filed a few years back in connection to a timeshare dispute.
Got stopped at immigration, and then shortly after we were detained by 7 to 10 officers telling us that we were being arrested. There was a warrant for us being fraud.
On their flight, U.S. Congressman Tom Barrett, who negotiated their freedom.
We worked closely with the State Department, hit the ground running in Mexico, met with them immediately upon our arrival, got to work with Mexican authorities, and then worked to broker an arrangement and a deal to get them out, and I'm really proud and thankful we were able to do that tonight.
After getting off the plane, the two spent time hugging their children. Although they're no longer in prison, they still have to deal with the memories of their vacation that turned into a nightmare.
It was awful. And the prison itself for the first 2 weeks were terrible until the consulate got involved. And then it was better, but I mean, it's nothing like you'd ever want to go through. It's unbelievable.
The Akeos went on to sue, seeking unspecified monetary damages and a jury trial in August. You can learn more on the Akeos story on a special episode of On the Docket, all about the Akeos fight to return to Michigan, streaming now on 13+. Next on the docket, we look into homicides that got the attention of West Michiganders. Resentencings for juvenile lifers, murder over divorce papers, and accidental party shootings are next. In January, a state parole board decided to release a Sparta man sent to prison decades ago for a gruesome murder. In 1996, Federico Cruz was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for beheading 17-year-old David Crawford. Cruz recorded himself talking to and mutilating Crawford's head. Because he was 16 at the time of his conviction, he later received a lesser sentence under a 2012 Supreme Court ruling that said a life sentence for a minor violated the 8th Amendment.
I just remember my mom sitting there with her son's photograph in the front row during the resentencing.
Kent County prosecutor Chris Becker thinks Federico Cruz should spend the rest of his life in prison.
There's a punishment. They took a life. They took a life in a horrific, one of the most horrific things you can do, cutting off the head and then videotaping, dancing with it. It's not just about rehabilitation.
As a 16-year-old, Cruz killed 17-year-old David Crawford near Sparta, severing his head and making a videotape of him talking to it. Cruz was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, in 2012, the United States Supreme Court struck down mandatory life sentences for juveniles. In 2018, Cruz went in front of a judge for resentencing, but was denied parole. Here's what he had to say during that hearing.
It's the worst feeling in the whole world, knowing that I did that.
Then, in 2023, Cruz was given a shorter sentence and would be eligible for parole after serving 35 years in prison. At the time, he has already served 27 years. While Becker disagreed with the decision, he says the idea that Cruz could be out by March is disheartening for the family of David Crawford.
They don't have a whole lot of faith in the system and what happened here. We hear this very often from victims. Everything favors the defendant. It's all about the defendants. The defendants are the victims. And I can't. It's hard to argue with that in terms of a lot of the decisions that have been coming down and this reform that's been happening. It's horrible for them.
Cruz was paroled in March of 2025. After a mistrial in May, a Grand Rapids man pleaded guilty to killing his wife after she served him divorce papers. Marcus Lofton is continuing to serve his prison sentence after being sentenced in August. A Grand Rapids man will spend over 2 decades in prison for killing his wife in 2023. It happened the day after Alicia Lofton served Marcus Lofton divorce papers, just 6 months after they were married. He went to trial in May, but it ended in a mistrial. Then, months later, Lofton pleaded guilty to felony firearm and second-degree murder in her killing.
The day that I found out she was gone, I felt like my legs collapsed.
Several family members of Alicia addressed Lofton in court, saying they disapproved of him and knew he wasn't right for her, like her aunt Jennifer Lee.
I feel that he wasn't introduced to the family because he's an embarrassment.
Alicia's father, Arthur Joseph, had strong words for Lofton.
I just want the court to know that this guy is a piece of garbage.
My daughter introduced me to this guy one time, and I didn't like him from minute one.
And said Alicia hid her marriage from her family because they despised him.
Not much more I can say about this guy other than I wish I could handle this and serve justice on his ass right now. And that's it.
Alicia's daughter stared directly at Lofton as she told him he took her biggest supporter away from her.
So I just want you to know you will never win. And I want you to think about this for the rest of your life.
While Lofton's attorney says he's remorseful, Lofton was still sentenced to 2 years for felony firearm, followed by 25 to 50 for second-degree murder per the plea deal. Judge Scott A. Noto left Lofton with a brief statement before he was taken away.
I don't have anything further to say, Mr. Lofton. I think Mr. Joseph said it best, so I refer you to his words.
It was an emotional day in court in October as family members were packed inside for the sentencing of a woman driving under the influence while pregnant who crashed into that family, injuring several and killing 2. Ashley Monroe will spend decades in prison for the fatal May 2024 crash. Victims, widows, mothers, brothers, children made up the 10 people who addressed Ashley Monroe in court as she sobbed at the defense table.
Oh, not killed him. You murdered him. Let's get that straight.
Monroe will spend minimum 3 decades in prison for killing 2 men and injuring 14 others as they walked home from a park in Clinton County in May 2024. Monroe was driving drunk over twice the legal limit and was pregnant when she ran into the group and then drove off.
I feel my throat getting dry from screaming John's name. Again and again, hoping that if I screamed loud enough, he might wake up. But he never did.
That's Dr. Erica Blash, widow of 30-year-old Jonathan Esch, who died in the crash and once lived in Grand Haven, who says it was not intoxication that led Monroe to crash into her and her family, but inhumanity.
You chose to drink while pregnant. You chose to drive. And perhaps most vile of all, you chose to run over an entire family and then flee.
Esch's brother-in-law, 42-year-old Daniel Harris from Grand Ledge, also died in the crash. Harris's widow, Jessica, lost her leg in the crash and almost died.
The biggest point that I would like to leave this court with today is that we had no choice in what happened to us on May 18th, 2024. Miss Monroe did. This was no accident, as it was 100% preventable.
Their child thought a bomb had gone off and will never experience life milestones with her father.
In short, I miss my pop, I miss my Uncle John, and I miss my old life. I wish Miss Monroe had just called an Uber or a friend or her boyfriend to drive her home instead of choosing to drive while drunk.
Monroe was somber as she was handed 30 to 60 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections and a no-contact order with the victims, their schools, places of employment, or residences. Monroe chose not to speak at her sentencing, which is her right. Another emotional day in court in October as a young man was sentenced for an accidental shooting at a house party. Weston Muhlenberg expressed remorse for the killing, which took the life of a GVSU student. The courtroom was overflowing Monday morning as a 20-year-old was sentenced for accidentally shooting a GVSU student through the floor of a house, killing him at a party in May.
This wasn't an accident. It involved many deliberate, foolish decisions and actions which didn't just take Connor from us, but took the life we all had with him and changed us all until the end of our lives.
19-year-old Connor Lauderman was a floor below Weston Muhlenberg on May 9th when Muhlenberg, who was drinking, fired 7 shots from a rifle through the floor, hitting Lauderman in the head and killing him. Lauderman's father, Steve, says the family mourns the future they will never have. While he desires to forgive Muhlenberg, he does not think he will ever forget.
I don't think there will ever be a time when I see you and I won't have a flashback of my son's lifeless body in a hospital emergency room, surrounded by doctors and nurses, desperately trying to save his life.
Ray, Connor's girlfriend of 3 years, told the court they had just went shopping for an engagement ring.
For me, the reality of grief is feeling so alone.
A month before he was killed, they drove down the street where the incident happened.
He looked at me and said, "Ray, I hope that I die first, because I would not be able to live without you." I looked at him, laughed, and said, "Oh, Connor, don't worry about that. We have at least 50 years. There's a lot that we have to do first."
Muhlenberg says it pains him to know he took Connor away from all of them.
The worst part is how permanent the consequences of my stupid choices are. Choices I can never explain or take back. Those choices that night will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Judge John Holsing says unlike other defendants who face this charge, there was no intended consequence.
Intended consequence here. Certainly there was an act, but there was no intended consequence here. Obviously the result was catastrophic.
Sentencing Muhlenberg to 70 to 300 months in prison. Next on the docket, 3 years in court, 2 weeks of trial, and a hung jury. We look back at the trial of former Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schur next. One of the biggest cases for 13 on Your Side in 2025 was the trial of former Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schur in May. Schur was charged in the death of Patrick Lyoya during a traffic stop in 2022. There was a lot that happened in the 2-week trial, which ultimately ended with a hung jury, with County Prosecutor Chris Becker choosing not to retry. Here's a snippet of the culmination of a highly publicized 3-year case.
That's it. That's how much time he's got to make up his mind. That's what you're judging him on.
Closing arguments for the defense in the trial of former Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schur, charged with murder in the death of Patrick Lyoya. Attorney Matt Borgula addressing the jury in defense of his client. Borgula arguing the prosecution had attempted to make the case something it was not.
You are not here to judge the GRPD policy. You are not here to judge whether it was reasonable for him to chase Patrick Lyoya.
Rather, he argued, it was another piece that fell to the 12 people who will decide Schur's fate.
You have to decide whether the prosecutor has proven beyond a reasonable doubt, whether Grand Rapids Police Department Officer Christopher Schur had a reasonable fear of great bodily harm or death.
Borgula also addressing past testimony from the prosecution's witnesses. In his view, they opened the door for reasonable doubt.
They're disagreeing with each other on the basis for why he should or should not be in fear. How can you convict someone for acting unreasonably and not being in fear when their own experts disagree? And certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt.
While experts had spoken to generally accepted practices, Borgula further arguing the jury should deeply consider this officer's training.
Why is this relevant? Because you're considering the knowledge of the officer, not generally accepted police practices. They may coincide from time to time, but you're looking at what, he's a street cop. He's trained.
The moment Schur had a decision to make. And whether the prosecution had proved what he did was unreasonable beyond a reasonable doubt was what the defense argued this case was about.
As the trial comes to a close, Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker reiterated to the jury what the state has been arguing for the past 3 years.
When he fired the shot, he intended to kill. That is clear when you put a bullet in somebody's back of somebody's head.
The prosecution's belief that this was an intentional, unjustifiable killing. At the beginning of the nearly 30-minute closing argument, Becker asks the jury to not become numb to seeing the video of the incident over and over.
It wasn't TV, it's not movies. This is a real man, a human being, who was shot in the back of the head back in April of 2022. We watched it over and over.
He says just because Lyoya had the taser did not mean he needed to die.
No evidence, no evidence, never said he threatened it, said he was going to use it, that I was going to kill you, said anything like that. He simply had the taser as one of the justifications of why I had to shoot.
He recognizes Lyoya wasn't a perfect man.
Because Patrick is no saint. I'm not going to sit here and argue Patrick was a saint. He was drunk driving. He was resisting. He was driving without a driver's license. None of those are executable offenses.
But he believes no actions taken that day by Lyoya justified the outcome. He referenced Christopher Schur's statement to the Michigan State Police days after the shooting, where Schur said Lyoya was trying to get away.
That's the defendant's perspective.
Closing his argument, he asks the jury what from this traffic stop would lead to a justifiable shooting.
This is a traffic stop. At the time the defendant knew what was going on. It was for a bad plate and no driver's license. What out of all this, he didn't think he was going to die?
Get in the car. Dude,
I'm stopping you.
More than 3 years after former Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Scher shot and killed Patrick Lyoya in April of 2022, 9 days of trial, more than 5 of testimony, and 4 of jury deliberation, Scher's second-degree murder trial came to a close.
So what I'm going to do is declare a mistrial.
2 days after the jury deadlocked and Judge Christina Mims told jurors to keep deliberating, they came back deadlocked for a second time Thursday. This time, though, Judge Mims declared a mistrial.
It hurt my family, my wife, we are bleeding.
Lyoya's parents spoke right after that announcement through an interpreter.
And we're not going to be tired until when we find the justice for our son.
What happened today is not what anybody was expecting or wanted. We're hoping for a verdict, and I think the family, but they're extremely disappointed, as am I.
Obviously not the outcome Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker was working toward.
But especially if you look across the country, there's a number of police-involved incidents where it ends up in a hung jury quite a bit. So we always knew there was a possibility. It's a difficult case.
My sense is that they worked very hard to come to conclusion, and sometimes you just can't.
Defense attorney Matt Borgula described what he felt was a signal from the jury.
It was communicated that it was there was always a majority for acquittal on both.
While Scher wasn't found guilty in this trial, Borgula says it's still not a happy moment for anyone.
We cannot declare victory because there really is no winning here. A man died, and that is a very serious thing.
Prosecutor Becker can now retry the case, offer a plea deal, or dismiss it altogether. While unknown when he'll make that choice, he says he'll take the Lyoya family's feelings and jury feedback into consideration.
I'm not going to let this drag out. I mean, I'm going to be considerate of the community. I mean, this is a big decision, but I'm not going to rush through it.
When Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker took the podium Thursday morning, he said he was going to cut right to the chase. He would not be seeking a retrial in the murder trial of Christopher Scher.
Basically what it boils down to is I don't think we reach a different verdict if I do a retrial in this case. The jury came back deadlocked.
He spoke to Patrick Lyoya's father, who was disappointed in the decision, and Becker knows community members will be too. But it's not a decision he made lightly.
I thought we presented a good case. I presented everything I wanted. All the facts were out there that I had, and it's not like I can change anything. There's no different things that I'm going to be able to change in presenting this case a second time.
Becker says it comes down to 2 things. He believes he could not present the case any differently or better, and the jury.
I think we had a really good jury.
The jury, he believes, would not be able to come to a unanimous decision. He says the initial split of jurors was 4 for acquittal, 4 for guilty, and 4 undecided, which became 7 for acquittal and 5 for guilty, and finally ended up with 10 for not guilty and 2 for guilty.
I just don't see a place where we get 12 people to agree.
He says community members contacting him about the case nor the cost of the case played into his decision.
I made this decision based on the facts, based on the law, and what I thought I could prove. Like I said, I thought it went as good as it could have.
While he says Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel could press charges, she has not reached out to his office to do so. Becker also says he has no say on whether Scher could get rehired by the GRPD, nor any control over GRPD policies. Scher had his arrest records, fingerprints, and biometric data destroyed in August. Thanks for joining me in this episode of On the Docket on 13+. We have new episodes releasing every week, taking you into the courtroom for the latest updates and deep dives on crime in and around West Michigan. In the meantime, we'll bring you the latest on crime and court, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. And when breaking news affects you and your community, we stream live on 13+ with what you need to know right when you need to know. We'll see you next time with updates on What's on the Docket.